Working back on the Fluke 9010A cassette drive replacement project. I've been playing about with the design of the physical support I'm using. Now, as I said, I'm not sure yet if I'm going to be providing the physical support. I may only provide the bare PCB. It really depends on what the demand is and how many people are interested. But what I've got so far is the basic structure sorted out, and I wanted to show how I'm doing this so that if there's anyone interested, then maybe it will give some ideas as to how you could go about doing this. But what I've done is create a support structure that I've used a 3D printer to create. Spring-loaded, it's not really a catch, I'm just using the button as kind of a spring-loaded recess so I can press down on the rear edge of the door, and that allows it to pop open. So it's then an over-center action, so it clips up into position. I'll move the camera forward so you can see down inside. There's access then for the memory card and also the dip switches, which I've moved around. They weren't very accessible the way I had them previously, but I'll just move the camera so you can see inside. Okay, so the way I've got this organised, there are 3 holes that the 3 status LEDs will shine through. They'll be attached to the back of the PCB, as will the dip switch, and as you can see they're far more accessible in this position. It's just easy to get in here now and access them. And I've moved them to the front as well so that they're easier to see. And the memory card will sit in the right hand location. So rather than try and show you in this dark recess, I've printed off one of the supports and the top covers that has the support for the memory card, and we'll have a look at that. Okay, I've printed this in grey, although I would more than likely use black for my own unit. I've just used grey here because it shows up a lot better than the black does. And it's in 2 parts, or 2 basic parts, and it now has an addition to the top part of the cover for this small edge connector. It's a press fit into the this part of the printed moulding, and there are a couple of holes for screws to hold it into position. The memory cards themselves will be this size and shape. This isn't one, this is just a mock-up I've made. I do have some on order, but this is the size and shape they will be. And this flap will normally open to about this position, and then the cards just simply slot into the edge connector, and then you can just close the flap down. And you can see I've angled it to give the best access so you can easily get hold of the card, and makes it easier to plug in and out. And then the wires will come down and go through the right hand side of the moulding and then onto the PCB. And this gives quite a nice, it's quite a nice appearance when it's closed. It looks like the original cassette, but also it's very easy to get the cards in and out, and the connector, etc., is very easy to wire up. There's only 4 wires going to it, and of course I'll make the cards as cheap as possible. It's just going to be the board, a serial EEPROM, a resistor and a capacitor, so it shouldn't be too expensive to make these. And the idea is that each one will replace anything from 2 to 8 tapes, depending on the capacity of the memory chip that's fitted. And the whole thing then just bolts up into the position where the original cassette was. So that's how far I've got. I've got the boards on order, and as soon as they turn up I'll get one made up, and we'll start testing it and then doing a bit more development on the firmware. Now, one question I was asked of one of the previous videos on this series was what printer do I use for printing these 3D parts? So I thought I'd just quickly answer that by having a quick look at the printers that I've got. And so we'll pop down to the office and have a look at the printers, and I'll just go through the pros and cons of each of the different printers that I have. So I have a number of printers. I'll show you just 3 of them, but I'll show you from the cheapest one that I have to the most expensive, and I'll just quickly touch on the pros and cons of each one. So this is the cheapest one I have. I've had this for probably 10 years now, 8 to 10 years. I can't remember exactly when I bought it. I've made a few modifications. I've changed the heads. It's a dual head one. I've changed the nozzle assembly to an all metal hot end. I've changed the door orientation. It used to hinge upwards. It was a real nuisance. I've changed it so up and sideways. And one of the main issues with 3D printers is the bed. I usually use a heated bed and run it at 50 or 60 degrees depending on what I'm printing. But I always had a problem. Either the print wouldn't stick or it would stick and then wouldn't come off. So what I tend to do now is I use the print material, the stickers that you get, but they need to be considered as consumables. So I don't actually stick them on directly. What I do is I use tape or these little clips to hold them in place. And that means that when I've done the print, I can just lift this off. It will then peel back and you can get the model off very easily without having to resort to hammers and chisels and whatever else to get them off. And this works very well, and then of course you can just throw it away and replace it when it wears out. This is a good printer. It's very nice to use in terms of it's quick, it's easy, it's simple. The software is relatively easy to use, and it's been very reliable. There's a few things with it. It makes a lot of noise, it vibrates. Print quality is not too bad. There can be a bit of an issue because the platform is not very well supported, so it just tends to vibrate and you get artifacts showing on the print. But it's nice and convenient, it's nice and light, it's easy to move, and if you want a good cheap printer, then these are good. Like I said, I've had it for a long time and it's still going strong, so I tend to use this for simple prototyping. If I want to do something quick and dirty, then I'll print it on this. If it's something very small, then I'll use this, and if I want something like a switch cap or something that has to be smooth, again I'll use this. I replace the textured print surface with a glass plate, and it gives an extremely nice clear finish, and being dual head I can use 2-color filaments, and it's good for text on keycaps, that sort of thing. So that's the first one. We'll look at the next one. The only problem with this is the size. It's got quite a small print volume, so if you want something with a bit more space, if you need to print something that's more than say 4 or 5 inches, then you can't do it on this. It just doesn't have the capacity. So we'll look at the next one, which I got to address that limitation. Okay, this is the next machine. It's a Flash Forge again, but this is a Guider 2. Much bigger print volume. It's about 6 times the volume, and this is it's fundamentally it's just a bigger printer. I don't like it as much as the smaller one. It's too slow in terms of its preparing to print, but once you get it up and running, it's not too bad. It does take a bit of effort to keep it leveled. It's got a fairly good support on the platform, but it does need leveling on a fairly regular basis, and especially when you replace the surface. I do the same thing with the surface on this. I use it as a removable surface and I don't stick it down completely, and that works fairly well. And again, I tend to use this in a heated form, and I've had this now for a couple of years I think, and it's done quite a lot of work. It's been reasonably reliable. The only problem I've had with it is it's suddenly developed a big offset in temperature for the print head, that once I was aware of that, it's something I can work around. But it's been mechanically fairly reliable. As I said, the only thing with it is because of the way it's designed, you need to make sure it runs at a fairly constant temperature. If the temperature varies, then you'll get some issues with print quality, or the print won't stick to the bed. But I tend to use this for larger prototypes. If I want to do something fairly large and it's going to run for a long time, then I'll use this. I can just leave it running. I nearly always have something printing somewhere, so this is the one that will tend to be sitting in the background doing that. Some print jobs can take 10 or 12 hours, and so this will be tucked away doing the print, and generally speaking it's just used for large prototyping. Okay, it's more expensive than the first one, costs about twice as much as that one, but as you can see it is a much bigger printer, but on the same sort of scale in terms of quality of print. The print output's quite good. It's different software for each of these printers, of course. The software I use for this is a bit more capable than the software I used for the first one, although you can use the software on both. You can mix and match it if you're prepared to make sure the G code that's being produced is suitable for the particular printer. But as I say, it's fundamentally it's a workhorse, and that's what it's used for. And again, I've made a few modifications, mostly to the print head. I've upgraded it to an all-metal hot end, and made a few modifications to the platform to stiffen it. But other than that, it's been reasonably reliable. So onto the next printer. I needed something, because I do a lot of professional prints. I needed something that would give me something that provides better print quality than these two cheaper printers. So we'll have a look at that next. Okay, this is the next printer. This is a Raise 3D Pro 2. This is really a different class of printer to the first two that I've shown. This is more aimed at the professional user, and to that end it costs well over twice as much as the other two combined. Massively heavy, and the whole inner structure is a 1/4 inch thick steel, so it's got steel beams up each side, steel plates, and that's one of the downfalls with the cheaper printers. They tend to be too flexible, and they move around and constantly need adjustment and leveling, whereas this rock solid, never really needs the bed to be re-leveled. And the whole thing is such a nice design. It's a complete design. Some very clever features. The print head itself is exceptionally clever. The way it's driven is very clever. The drive shafts are also the support guides, and if you've ever built any clocks, you'll know what advantage that can give you in terms of reducing vibration and resonance. It's a very good design. Also, this is running now, and the only thing I can hear is the fan. If you're familiar with 3D printers, you'll know that they are normally extremely noisy, vibrate and rattle and shake about, whereas this is almost silent when it's working. The only thing, as I say, I can hear is the cooling fan on the back. Got a HEPA filter built in, so it tends to not make smells and fumes. And it's very easy to use. This thing sits on the network, so it's accessed directly from the software. The software for this is extremely good. The entire machine is very well designed. The whole way it's designed, the bed is removable, so you can get it out to remove the models. Built-in high-resolution touchscreen. The reels are accessible from the side, so you don't have to crawl around the back. The only criticism I have with the design of this, and it's one of those things that it's dumb, and it's kind of surprising, because the rest of the machine is so well designed, so well engineered, that there's a small thing that just makes it kind of spoils that concept of having been thought through. And that is, the main switch, the on-off switch, is on the back. So the idea of having these reels on the side so you can push it up against the wall or in the corner is extremely good. It's a real step forward compared to the other machines I have. But then to put the power switch on the back, so you can't reach it once it's actually in position. You've got to use the power switch on the end of the cord. It's just kind of dumb. It's a sort of dummy thing to do. If they'd put the power switch on the front, that would be far more sensible, and I really don't understand why they didn't do that. Other than that, I think the design is fantastic. You got big twin ball screws, 4 guide posts, and it really does show in the quality of the prints. And I have yet to have a failed print on this machine. Probably a dangerous thing to say, but pretty much from the first time I plugged it in. As soon as it started printing, you could tell straight away that this is a different class of machine. But it is too expensive for hobby use, and even for me, I do need to make sure it earns its keep. But it is certainly one of those machines that is well worth having if you're doing a large amount of 3D printing. So after showing the 3 printers, which one did I use to print the parts on that I demonstrated? Well, the first ones I showed, the black parts, were printed on the first printer, the cheap one, and the ones I've just shown you, the grey ones, were printed on this machine. The only reason for doing that was just it was free at the time. So they are just fairly quick prototype printing. For high resolution printing, then this is obviously what I would use. For prototyping, I'll use one of the other two, depending on which one's not in use and the size of the thing I'm trying to print. Okay, well, hopefully you found that interesting and it answers the question. These are the printers I use. I'm not really trying to recommend or condemn any of them. They all do the job that is expected of them to varying degrees. If I was going to buy one for professional use, and of course it would be this one. If I was going to buy one for just hobby use, it would be the cheap one. They do vary a lot, and I can't vouch for other printers, other types that I haven't tried, but as I say, I think the thing with 3D printers, it's very much a case of getting to know the printers that you have, persisting with them and working around any small issues that they might have.